Okay, we're continuing with the top 10 teachings of the Gemara Brachos, Daf Tes Vav. We're doing 7, 8, and 9. Number 7 was the law about deaf people today. It seems in the Gemara has a little bit of a discussion of a deaf person who can speak but can't hear. But that leads us to a broader conversation about people in halacha that are deaf, that when they can speak and not hear, there are mechuyev b'mitzvot, they're obligated in mitzvot. And the particular story that we're talking about here, about fulfilling other people and their obligation to hear the Megillah, I do believe that we might fulfill our obligation from them. It seems like that from the Gemara. In the maskana of the Gemara, at least, that's what it would seem like to be the halacha. I was not able to look it up in the Shulchan Aruch yet. But what I'm more concerned about is the cheresh she'eno shomea ve'eno medaber, somebody who's deaf and mute, can't hear, can't speak. In the halacha, sometimes that person is treated as somebody who's not mentally competent, similar to a shota. There are exceptions for that, and many exceptions perhaps even. And if you are more interested in the details, you could refer to the Gemara in Gittin Ayin Aleph Amud Beis 71a. I didn't have a chance to look it up. But Herschel Schachter quotes the Rashash. The Rashash, I think, either was told or went to see a special school for deaf patients where they taught them how to use sign language to communicate from one another. We know Helen Keller and everything like that. So based on that, the Rashash says today, with these new advances in our ability to teach deaf, mute people how to communicate, they no longer have the status that would be similar to a shota. They do have a status of a gadol. They take on the status of a regular adult and are obligated in mitzvot and so on and so forth, and we treat them with the same laws as a regular person. It's just an amazing thing is that as we advance in certain skill sets that we're able to take somebody, imagine for much of history, somebody who was deaf and mute just had so little ability to really connect with other people because they couldn't hear them and they couldn't communicate back. And now because of things like sign language and other things, what amazing advances are. And the halacha does change because the mitziyut, the reality, does change. At least that's what the Rashash says. So I'm happy to share that with you. And I'm sure there's more to be learned in that. I did not have time to research that. So that's just a little mention, honorable mention. Number 8 is the womb and the grave, shame in pleasure, and davening and its relationship to overcoming our origin stories, the shame of being born, because we're all born from, I don't want to say born from sin, but born from an act that is considered private and not, and to some people shameful. And you know what I'm talking about. Well, let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara number 8 says, it quotes a Madichsiv Shalosh Henalo Sishba'ana Sha'ol V'otzer Rachem. The Gemara is referring to a verse in, how did I tell you? What do you want to know? Where something is? So before I showed you the Masoras Hashas, that's where the Talmud is. But if it's a biblical quote, you'll find it right in between the Gemara and the Rashi. So it's Mishlei Lamed. It's chapter 30 of Mishlei. I believe it's like verse 15 or something. It's actually 2 verses. The beginning of the first says, La'aluka shte banot. Many people translate that as a leech has 2 daughters. Crazy story, right? But there's another translation which is La'aluka shte banot, which means when you die or in the grave, there are 2 things that can happen, either heaven or hell. Rashi brings down that comment. And then the verse goes on and says, Shalosh Hena, there are 3. And then there are a few other things, about 4 in that verse. And then the next verse says, 3 that are never satiated. The next verse says, Sha'ol v'otzerachem, a grave and a barren womb. And the verse goes on. But here's the analysis from our Gemara. V'chima inyan sha'ol v'otzel rechem. What's the connection between the grave and rechem? There's no emphasis here, by the way, anymore on a barren womb. It's just a womb at this point. Let's see. The Gemara says the following: Elalomer lacha, but to teach you an important lesson. Ma rechem machnis umotzi, just like a womb takes in and gives out. What that means is, in order to have a child, there has to be intimacy. That's to take in. Motzi is the birth of the child. Af sha'ol machnis umotzi. Also, a grave takes in, meaning at burial, the body enters into the earth and is in the ground. Umotzi, and it releases it for tchias hamesim, when the dead come to life. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. This is a logical inference. Uma rechem shemachnisin ba b'chashay motziin mimene b'koli kolos. A womb that when there is intimacy, it's done in private, quietly. People don't say, "Oh, we're going to do this and this." It says in the Gemara that even though everybody knows that a chas and kala, they know what's going to happen. If you say it, it's considered disgusting. I don't remember the Zaretz and Maguna. I don't remember the exact lashon. So we don't talk about these things. We don't. And yet when the baby comes out, simmin tov, a mazel tov, a simmin tov. There's a simchat tabat. There's a bris. Everybody is so happy. But what do you mean? I mean. It's strange, right? I'm going to explain what that is. Now, sha'ol shemachlisim baba kolakolos, a grave, when somebody's buried, everybody makes a big to-do about it, meaning nobody's hiding the funeral, everybody announces the funeral. Eno din shemotziim mimenu b'kolakolos, when the grave will come out, the person will be revived from the dead in tchias hamesim, there'll be, of course, a great noise, jubilation. Mekan tshuva la'omer in tchias hamesim in Torah. This is a response for those who say there is no tchias hamesim in the Torah. Okay, let's take a look at the Meshiloach on this. Okay, so we have to understand one of the things that I started noticing, in particular when I take a moment. It's harder for me to turn the ideas of the Talmud into a tefillah than studying. It's much harder. First of all, I could sit there for an hour and nothing happens, 2 hours and nothing happens. But when it does start happening, two things start happening. Before I get any kind of emotional feeling in which the prayer kind of flows out of, I start seeing a pattern in the daf. I start seeing how the different parts of the daf are also connected, have an interconnection. Because, a lot of the connections between one subject and another seem tenuous at best. They're just almost like just free association. But even in free association, there's something going on. And in the Gemara in particular, the Meshiloach makes a point to say the hemshech of the sugyos, the continuity and flow of one thing to another, from one concept to another, of the discussions of the Talmud are tremendously related to one another, and we can learn a lot from them. So here's one of the examples in which the Meshiloach says, what are we talking about here in this daf? What's one of the main things? The main thing we're talking about, since the Mishnah with Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda and then Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, is this concept of somebody who recites the Shema but doesn't hear it with his ears or her ears. The Meir Shiloh suggests the following, that that's a metaphor not just for somebody who didn't hear it physically. It means they didn't hear it. They didn't listen to it. They said, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, b'chol nafshecha b'chol ma'odecha, with all your soul, with all your might and being. They said it, but they didn't hear it. It didn't enter into them. It didn't affect them. What does that mean? That means in Ishbitz, one of the biggest challenges, because Ishbitz was related to Katz, which was related to Pshischa, right? Simcha Bunim Pshischa, the Yid HaKadosh, who is it was basically what it was is there was the seer of Lublin who had a student who was his age even and equal to him in many ways, named the Yid HaKadosh, who broke away from the seer. And then a new dynasty started, the Yid, then Reb Simcha Bunim, and then the Kotzker, and then the Ishbitzer. One thing they all had in common, it's not clear, a lot of people don't think the Ishbitzer had this in common, he did, with these three and then four, the Ishbitzer would be the fourth if you include him, is that they understood the danger of mitzvahs anasha melumada. They understood the danger of habituation, either that plagued the Misnagdisha world and the Hasidisha world. The plague of the Misnagdisha world was different than the plague of the Hasidisha world, but they both had a problem. And one of the main problems is the word habituation. If you look it up in many dictionaries, say habits that one does without enthusiasm. Again, I don't know if it's exactly, but this is the idea. Habituation is a psychological state in which one repeats an action without intention. Ouch. Perhaps in a state of I wish I didn't have to do this. So that's how the Meshloach interprets the person who's reading the Shema but doesn't hear it, meaning it's just a repetitive act that's not permeating the heart of the person. How many times do we daven, but how often does the davening change us and affect us and awaken us to a higher reality to make us better people? Maybe a little bit it does, maybe a little bit. So comes the Meir Shiloh and says, that person still feels bad about it. I daven every day and I don't feel like I'm moving. So I feel bad about that. I don't feel good that I'm not making myself a really amazing person spiritually. I'm not happy about that. But God forbid I should become depressed and feel like I'm a failure because I haven't been able to transform myself into the ultimate spiritual person that I would like to be. One of the main ideas is that the Torah that I want and the Torah of where I am feel so far apart. And God will show me that they're not as far apart as I think they are. Let's take the womb and the grave, for example. So the Meshulach explains the following. The womb represents a person's desire for physical intimacy, fantasies, and all of those things that a person has, and a person feels guilty because they feel like, I'm so far from being a good person. I'm thinking so much about myself. I'm so full of a Yetzirah. How can I ever fix my soul? But yet, what comes out of the Yetzirah? What happens when a man and a woman are together? They're together for their own pleasure, yet a child is born, and the world rejoices because of that child. So although the person can feel guilty about the fact that they were in it for themselves, they lost their holiness and fell prey to their own basic desires, and they could wallow in self-pity of their lack of Kedusha. But that would be a mistake. Look at the outcome. Look at what happened. The person had a baby. Person, because of the Yetzirah, they went out on a date. They got together with somebody. They ended up getting them pregnant. Hopefully it should happen in a marriage, so everything should work out. Everybody should be accepted. But you get the idea. The idea is that the Gemara says that act, there is no one that has pure, acceptance of it as they are on the level. Right? Nobody says, I'm on such... The last person to be on the level to say, I want to be with my wife, was Jacob, who said, give me my wife so I can be with her. I can live with her. Because he was so pure. But since then, nobody's pure like that. Comes the Meshulach and says, you know what this Gemara is telling us? Don't be too hard on yourselves. Because the end is Mochiach, is showing us on the beginning that there was a part of it that was L'Shem Shemayim. We didn't know that it was L'Shem Shemayim. We thought it was only for our own Yetzirah. But if we go deep enough, there's going to be a part that we're going to uncover that's also L'Shem Shemayim. Let me see if I could find this in... That's why, by the way, Reb Tavi says that you're Yotze even if you didn't hear. Right? That's probably why if a deaf person reads any of these things, he's Yotze, you're Yotze. That's an aside. But meaning we're all deaf in that sense that we have ears that listen, but do we really hear? The deaf person is maybe less deaf than the people who can physically hear. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to show us the L'Shem Shemayim in the depth of our heart. Okay, great. So that's number 8 about the womb, and number 9 is about we don't learn a gezirah shava because of a limud, savtem, which is strange. Okay, let me explain to you what it is. There's a concept in the Gemara that says that when one verse is similar to another verse, it's called the gezirah shava. It's called a verse with the same word in it. And the rabbis often say we learn out from this word here in this context to apply that principle into another situation because of the same use of the same word. It's a very strange way of learning things, and the only way that would work is we believe that there is a there is a received tradition of when to say the gezirah shava, to say that we can make a parallel between the two words. Here in our Gemara, it's a very strange Gemara. The Gemara says the following thing. Tana Rab Oshia Kamei Rava. Rab Oshia taught in front of Rava. Uchsavtem hakol b'ksav. In the Shema, right? We write the Shema in two things. We write it in the mezuzah, and we also write the Shema in the tefillin. And it says in the Shema, Chsav Tam, you should write it, but it also, the way that word is written means you should write it whole or complete. And the Gemara is going to say that means Hakol B'chsav, write everything in writing. Afilu Tzavos, even the commands regarding the writing or the tying of the tefillin also need to be included in the chapter that we write. So Amarle de Amar Lachmani, like, why are you saying this? Who would I think wouldn't agree with this? And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, he the Amar Gabi Sota, alos ksiv, tzavos ena kosev, tzavos ena kosev. There's an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says the Sota, they would write a section that would describe the curses of the Sota on a parchment and erase it in the water, but they wouldn't write certain descriptions of the commands in that section. Why? Because it says they should write only the curses, not the commands. However, in contradistinction to the what we write in the mezuzah and the tefillin, it says you should write it whole. We include the commands themselves regarding them being written. Should also be the part that said write this down should also be written down in the tefillin and the mezuzah. So the Gemara says Tamad Rabbi Yehuda Mishum L'chsiv V'Kasav. Tamad Rabbi Yehuda Mishum L'chsiv Alos in Tzavos Lo. The Gemara says he has a special limud. He has a special reason why he's saying what he's saying, but that only applies to there, not to here. The Gemara says, the reason we need it is because I might think we learn gezirah shava from the word ksiva. It says ksiva here, it says ksiva there. Mahasam alos in Tzavos Lo. Then I'd extrapolate whatever is there. There we only include the alos and not the tzavos. Afachanami Tzavos Lo. I would say also I wouldn't include the commands in the writing of the tefillin. Those words would be left off. Therefore, therefore the Torah comes to tell us you should write it whole, even the commands. So the question that some of the commentaries ask is, you don't need a limud, you don't need a special word to tell us not to have gezirah shava, not to deduce one word from another word in another place, because we only would use gezirah shava when it's a Masorah, when it's a tradition to make it. So that's a question. So there's various answers. One answer is that there's that maybe the Masorah, the tradition of when to make gezirah shava, is not an ironclad 100%. We know there's like a certain amount of gezirah shavos in certain sections, and the rabbis have to figure out which ones they are. So having a hint as to when to not make gezirah shava isn't totally outside of the question. So that's one of the answers. There are other answers as well. Now we're going to come to the 10th and final teachings, the top 10 teachings of Brachos Daf Tes Vav, and that is reading the Shema carefully and not mishkabobbling the words, not mixing the words together. And this is the Torah of the body versus the Torah of the mind. And what am I talking about? The Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, V'lamaditem shehei limud chatam. Your learning should be complete. What does that mean? She'it revach ben hadvekim. You should put a space between the letters that tend to stick together, right? Like in the Shema it says, upon your hearts. But when the last letter of that first word and the first letter of the second word are the same, they blur into al vavcha, into one word, and not to al livavecha. And the same thing with al livavchem, or bechol livavecha, or bechol livavchem, or esev bisadecha, bisadcha, or va'avadetem mehera. Pause. In all of those instances, the last letter of the first word and first letter of the second word are the same, and they'll get blurred. Hakanaf psil, right? Eschem me'aretz. Tosfos adds in a bunch of his own. So, but yet the Gemara says, Halacha l'maisa, the Gemara. Well, I don't know if it's halacha l'maisa, but the Gemara says the halacha is if you didn't pronounce the words correctly, you're still yotze. So for sure, if you blurred the words, you still fulfilled your obligation. So what is this? This Gemara is still coming back and saying, be careful to say each word, enunciate it properly, so they don't blur together. So that reminds me of another thing, which is that all of the words of the Kriya Shema come out to 248. If you include what the Chazan repeats, Ani Hashem Elokechem Emes, it comes out to 248, which is the Ramach Evarav, the 248 parts of the body. What that means is that the Shema is seen as an embodied Judaism. Every part of the body is represented. Every word is a part of the body. One of the nice things about hurting some part of your body is it's terrible, you feel the pain, but you realize that every part of your body has a function and has its own health and equilibrium. And sometimes a doctor will prescribe a particular drug just to heal one part of the body. Or you could possibly take the right type of food to heal that one type of the body. So spiritually speaking, you have the same concept. You have this idea that every mitzvah corresponds to a part of our body. For example, if you look, a lot of the Medrash points out, if you look at a lot of the intricacies of the Arba Minim, the four species that we take on Sukkos, the lulav is like the spine, right? So it's a long palm frond. The esrog, it looks like the heart. The hadassim look like the eyes. The hoshanis look like the mouth, right? And obviously we take them in our hands and we bring them up and down and side to side, and we bring them close to our heart. So what we're doing is, and there's a beautiful teaching that says, then the trees of the forest will jubilate. And the rabbis teach that when you see the trees in the forest kind of blowing in the wind on a beautiful day, a sunny day, when the trees are metaphorically dancing, what happens when a community says Hallel and together they swing their lulavim and esrogim like a ballet to the right, to the left, up, down? We become extensions of the forest. Our bodies become like the branches and the limbs and the trunks of the tree and its leaves praising God. So in that sense, it's very important to pronounce the words because we want to embody the Torah. It's important that the tefillin go together with the Shema because the tefillin embodies the Torah. We don't want to, I'm going to conclude with Martin Luther King, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who said, I pray with my feet. That's a Jewish concept. There's a reason why Martin Luther King Jr. was such close friends with Abraham Joshua Heschel and other key Jewish figures, is because he understood that there's a part of Torah that you can only get when your body is able to walk with the Torah. Thank you.